Morning, church. Morning. Privilege and a blessing to be able to be here and worship with you. Thank you for being here. Again, it is a blessing to be able to be here and to worship the Lord Jesus this morning. So, if you're joining us or not, we are going through the Gospel of Luke. As you notice there on your bulletin, we're in Luke chapter 4. And last week we looked at the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness. And today we'll look at the public ministry, really, of Jesus beginning in the synagogues in his hometown. So far we've seen the baptism of Jesus. We've seen the infancy narrative of Jesus. We've seen the promise of a child who would be the Savior of the world. Now we see Jesus get ready to go into his public ministry, and that is after his temptation in the wilderness. His temptation in the wilderness was recorded in Luke 4, verses 14 through 15. Wraps it up like this. It says that Jesus returned in the power of the Spirit to Galilee, and a report about him went out through the surrounding country. And he taught in the synagogues, being glorified by all. So after the temptation alone in the wilderness, Jesus overcomes that temptation and he comes out empowered by the Spirit. And so I'm going to read to us this morning from Luke chapter 4, verses 16 to 30. And then we'll see what the Lord has to say to us out of these passages. Luke chapter 4, picking up in verse 16. It says, "And he came to Nazareth when he had been brought up, where he had been brought up, and as was his custom, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and he stood up to read. And the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, 'The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor.' And he rolled up the scroll and gave it back to the attendant and sat down, and the eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. And he began to say to them, 'Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing.' And all spoke well of him and marveled at the gracious words that were coming from his mouth. And they said, 'Is not this Joseph's son?' And he said to them, 'Doubtless will quote to me this proverb, Physician, heal yourself. What we have heard you did at Capernaum, do here in your hometown as well.' And he said, 'Truly I say to you, no prophet is acceptable in his hometown. But in truth I tell you, there were many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the heavens were shut up for 3 years and 6 months, and a great famine came over all the land. And Elijah was sent to none of them, but only Zarephath in the land of Sidon, to a woman who was a widow. And there were many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet of Elisha, and none of them was cleansed, but only Naaman the Syrian. When they had heard these things, all in the synagogue were filled with wrath. And they rose up and drove him out of the town, and brought him to the brow of the hill on which their town was built, so that they could throw him down the cliff. But passing through their midst, he went away." Let us pray. Father, thank you so much for this day, the privilege and honor to gather with your people, the privilege and honor to open your word and proclaim the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ here at Bashford Baptist Church. You are good to us, and thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for new mercies each day, God. And we just pray this morning that you would, in fact, speak to us from your word, convict our hearts, drive us to repentance and renewed faith based on the work of your Spirit and the teaching of your word. Lord, hide me behind the cross and speak to us this morning. We love you, and it's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. So after his temptation in the wilderness, the Bible says that Jesus came to Nazareth where he had been brought up. Jesus Galilee in the power of the Spirit to his hometown. This is where Gabriel had initially made the promise of the child to Mary. This is where Joseph and Mary were living at the time of the census. And so Jesus went down with them to Nazareth, the Bible tells us, and it's where he was raised. And the Bible says that he submitted to his parents there. Notice that there are no reports of miracles done in Jesus' childhood up until this point. There's not. So Jesus, now empowered by the Spirit, is about to begin his public ministry. And again, in Nazareth, he was known as the supposed son of Joseph. So now he's returning in power to that same place. And it's in this power then that he begins that public ministry, and he does so by teaching in the synagogues. He was, remember, raised under the law, so his parents, being faithful Jews, took Jesus to worship. They took him to the synagogue, they took him to the temple to consecrate him. We've seen that in his birth narrative, and as we watch the story of Jesus unfold up until now, he was raised under the law, and that's because he alone came to fulfill the law. His parents took him to the temple at the time of consecration. They took him to the temple to be presented as a child. They took him to the temple, as you remember, when he was about 12 years old, and he stayed behind and was found teaching at the temple when they went for Passover. So he would have been accustomed then to going to the synagogue for worship. Verse 16 says that he was, as was his custom, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and he stood up to read. So what is this synagogue that Luke is referring to here? Well, so remember when we said that Jesus traveled with his family to the temple in Jerusalem. Jesus is living outside of Jerusalem in Nazareth, and anywhere that a temple is not in close proximity, if you have a group of Jews, namely 10 or more men, then they can form a synagogue so that they can participate in worship in that area. So if there are 10 or more Jewish men outside of Jerusalem, then a synagogue can be established for them to conduct their worship. And so Jesus, then being in Nazareth, is outside of Jerusalem, and obviously there is a population of Jews there. So it should be no surprise to us then that Jesus, with faithful Jewish parents, would attend worship in the synagogue. Now, also, remember Jesus was about 30 years old when we look at his genealogy at the beginning of chapter 4, and we said that at 30 years old he is at that point fit for serving in temple service. And so if he's fit then at age 30 to serve in temple service, then he is also fit to, as we see here, serve in service at the synagogue. So it should be no surprise that we see him participating in worship in the synagogue. So Jesus frequently taught in the synagogue. You can see that in Luke 11, 12, 13, 20, 21. It was not at all unorthodox for Jesus to be in the synagogue worshiping, and as we find now, at age 30, beginning his public ministry, started to teach there in the synagogue. So worship then in the synagogue, it consisted of a few things. It consisted of the reading of the Torah, which we would know as the Old Testament law. It would also consist of the reading of the prophets, as we see Jesus here reading from the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. There would also be instruction giving, and it would be like a sermon, like what we have here this morning. They would gather there for prayer. And there would even be issues of church discipline, or synagogue discipline, I guess we would say, at the synagogue. So worship outside of Jerusalem by faithful Jews was handled in the synagogue. And it took place there on the Sabbath. Sabbath is the Hebrew word Shabbat, which means to cease. So this was a command that God had given his people to rest. God created the earth, we see in Genesis chapter 1, and God created all things, all the heavens and the earth, and then he rested, and he commands his people to do the same. The Bible says that God rested on the seventh day. Exodus 20, verses 8 to 11 says, to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall do no work, you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For 6 days, in 6 days, the Lord God made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. And so the people were to work for 6 days and rest on the seventh. We've seen this when we talked about the manna having come down from heaven. The people were to gather manna for 6 days, and on the seventh day they were not even to gather manna. So it was a time really set apart for sacred assembly to the Lord. So we see Jesus essentially in church on Sabbath teaching. Now, worship-related activities were regularly permitted during the Sabbath. So you could have circumcisions, you could have dedication feasts, you could have the putting out of showbread, even sacrifices could be done on the Sabbath. I know I have a friend who went to Israel, and as he was in Israel, he was there on the Sabbath, and he said that there was such a restraint on what could be done on the Sabbath that the elevator was programmed to stop at each floor so that they wouldn't have to do the work of pushing the button on the elevator. Yes. So breaking the Sabbath, obviously, if it's set apart as a sacred time for the Lord, breaking the Sabbath carries a heavy penalty, and it was punishable by death. The Sabbath was the covenant sign of the Mosaic covenant for the Israelites. And here we find Jesus in the synagogue on the Sabbath. The Bible says that he stood up to read. So again, part of the worship that took place on the Sabbath was the reading of Scripture. Sometimes they would read it in arithmetic patterns by the calendar, so it would be easier for them to memorize Scripture, or easier for them to remember what the Word of the Lord said. Because at this time, not everyone could read, and we didn't have, everybody didn't have a Bible like we have now. They had a scroll, as we see, and it was kept in a special place, and the reader or the speaker for that time would come and read from the scroll, they would read from the Torah, or they would read from the prophets. And so it should be, again, no surprise that Jesus then is attending church here on the Sabbath, attending service on the Sabbath, and is reading from the scroll. This is how he was raised by Mary and Joseph. And again, we're here gathered today doing the same thing. Verse 17 says that the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the recovering of sight to the blind, set at liberty those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." So typically there would have been an attendant in the synagogue who would care for the scroll. The scroll was an expensive piece of papyrus or parchment or even animal skin that would have the writings of this prophet on it. It would have to be preserved. It's sort of somewhat like a library. And the attendant then, in an effort to preserve that scroll, would bring it to the speaker. And as we see here, part of the instruction is that it would be a public reading of that scroll, just like a sermon. So Jesus stood up to read from the scroll of Isaiah. So last week, again, we mentioned that the Spirit of God came upon Jesus through his temptation. He was empowered after overcoming his temptation. And we also mentioned that in the Old Testament, the Spirit of God would come along and come and inspire certain people for works. Isaiah was one of those people. Isaiah was a messianic prophet by the Spirit of God. Chapter 48 and verse 16 of Isaiah, it says that the Lord God has sent me and his Spirit. And his scroll would have been one of the most famous ones in ancient Near Eastern history at this time. And it is where we get our book of Isaiah from. And Jesus reads specifically from Isaiah 61, verses 1 to 2, as Anthony read this morning. And he also quotes part of Isaiah 58 The Bible says that he unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor, liberty to the captives, recovering sight to the blind, and liberty to those who are oppressed," and the year of the Lord's favor. And Isaiah says that the Spirit of the Lord was on him as well. And Isaiah is prophesying a future exile and a future restoration or a future redemption from Babylon. Israel was taken into captivity in Babylon, and Isaiah is prophesying about that captivity in Isaiah 61, and he's also prophesying about that return from exile. And Isaiah proclaimed a future time of liberty for the Israelites. And it would be a time when they would be liberated from exile, and the poverty and oppression that accompanies exile would no longer be. And in this proclamation, he describes the year of the Lord's favor. What Isaiah is describing as being the year of the Lord's favor is essentially a new era of blessing for the Israelites. And it would be characterized by God restoring his people. So he says it's the recovering of sight to the blind. So you're thinking both physically and spiritually. You're thinking liberty to those who are oppressed. Again, that's both physically and spiritually, as Isaiah is prophesying in 61. Now, one of the signs of the oppression for Israel was that they could not worship their God. They're in exile, and they are. The temple, when they were carried off into Babylon, was destroyed. And as they are in exile, then they have no way to worship God. And oddly enough, this is one of the things that God was judging them for, was them not worshiping him. Rather, their hearts were captivated by other quote-unquote small d gods. And so, essentially, what happens is they're taken off into exile, and they are given over to what they were chasing after. And Isaiah is prophesying the time when they would be redeemed. But Isaiah's message would also carry with it a promise then for a future redemption, which is something that you and I also look to. They were still waiting for a future Messiah, because now the Israelites, as Jesus catches up and he's reading from the prophet Isaiah in the synagogue on the Sabbath in Nazareth, as Jesus is physically there reading, people are oppressed by the Roman Empire and looking for a Messiah. And Jesus comes and proclaims the year of the Lord's favor, just like Isaiah did. So just like the people themselves were to observe the Sabbath, when we think about the year of the Lord's favor, or as the Bible calls it, the year of Jubilee, just like the people were called to celebrate rest and have a Sabbath day, there was also a command for Sabbath rest for the land. There's Leviticus 25, verses 1 and 2, says that the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land that I give you, the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord." And this is referred to as the year of Jubilee. And it was during this time then that Israel would proclaim liberty throughout the land. Leviticus 25:10 tells us. And so for people, it might look like this. Leviticus 25, verse 26 says, "If your brother becomes poor and sells part of his property, then his nearest redeemer shall come and redeem what his brother sold." So there was a time of restoration for the people, even for property. Verses 47-48 says, "If the stranger or sojourner with you become rich, and your brother beside him becomes poor and sells himself to the stranger or sojourner, you are to a member of stranger's clan, that after he is sold, he may be redeemed." Now, what's interesting is this is a time that Israel would have looked forward to. Who wouldn't look forward to having your property returned to you if you had to sell it? Or who wouldn't look forward to being freed if you had to sell yourself even into slavery? So it was a time of redemption for people. But what's interesting is that there's no record in the Old Testament of them having obeyed this command for a year of Jubilee. It seems like we're in a time that some people would probably look very forward to, where there have also been times for those in power who are doing the oppressing might have not looked forward to a degree. So it was never practiced. And as a result, then Israel was judged for that, and the land was judged for that. And here we find them oppressed by Rome, and Isaiah prophesying of a time when they are oppressed by the Babylonians. So Jesus reads from the scroll, the Isaiah scroll, and the Bible says in verse 20, and he rolled up the scroll and gave it back to the attendant and sat down. And the eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. And he began to say to them, today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. So Jesus is physically then, in the flesh, reading from the prophet Isaiah and telling the people that it's today that this is being fulfilled. Today the scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. But even so, we still wait time for the year of Jubilee, even in ourselves. There's an already not yet part of aspect of our sanctification, of our walk with Christ, as we kind of like right now are the Israelites wandering in the wilderness, waiting for a promised land. With this proclamation, Jesus is saying then that the kingdom of God is bursting onto the scene through the person and word of Jesus Christ. And the people then, in response, in the synagogue there, are captivated by what Jesus has to say. Verse 22 says, all spoke well of him and marveled at the gracious words that were coming from his mouth. And they said, is this not Joseph's son? Remember, Jesus referred to as the supposed son of Joseph, but we know in fact that he is God's son. The Bible says that all spoke well of him. So Jesus, even as the supposed son of Joseph, is above reproach. And there was no one to accuse him of anything up to this point. Remember, he is in his hometown as well. So there's no one to accuse him of anything. They have watched him grow up. They have watched him grow up in the synagogue. And now they see him shift to a public ministry where he's standing and proclaiming that Scripture is pointing to himself. They had no problem with that until verse 23. Verse 23 says, and he said to them, doubtless you will quote to me this proverb, physician, heal yourself. What we have heard you did in Capernaum, do here in your hometown as well. Now this part here is a prophecy, what we see happening with Jesus on the cross at his crucifixion. Jesus is in verse